Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Score podcast. As usual, I'm your co-host, Harry. Josh, say hi to everyone.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to your favorite podcast.
We are. Let me tell you something. In the realm of podcasts, I have to say, you and I, we're doing solid things. We're doing solid things.
Oh yeah,
Okay?
absolutely.
I love doing this on a weekly basis with you.
Likewise, my man.
Let's roll right into things. Football divisional games were quite interesting. I have to start off by giving a lot of kudos to your trust in those Washington Commanders from preseason because, man, they're a good team. They
Yeah,
beat those lines when nobody except for Commanders fans, and we're talking about crazy Commanders fans, because logical Commanders fans were like, this is probably not going to go our way.
I think
Everybody,
logical Commanders fans expected them to cover.
everybody really thought that, regardless of the covering, the betting aspect on things, who's going to win that game? Nobody thought the Commanders were taking that game, except for, like I said, diehard Commanders fans who were out of their minds. They
Absolutely
beat them up nicely. Jared Goff, you can't get rid of the ball that many times. You got to protect the ball a little bit better than that. That's how you lose those games. Because when you do that in the regular season, you might be able to fly by, which he's done, where he threw 5 picks in a game and they won that game. I think that was against the Bears. But in the
Let's
playoffs,
just say that 31 points would have been enough to win any of the other games.
Most likely, depending on who's on the other side. I mean, you could play the Bills and they could put up 40 points on you too.
Well, no, I'm saying based on the way every team played last week, if they would have had 31 against anyone else, they would have won.
Yeah. I mean, the Bills had 27, Ravens 25. Yeah, I mean, Eagles 28, and then obviously the Chiefs Texans was a low scoring game. But kudos to those Commanders. Jaden Daniels, special player. Those Commanders are doing some incredible things. There's nothing more I'd like to see than them beating the Eagles next week and going to the Super Bowl. At this point, it's always tough for a Giants fan to see 2 divisional teams there, but if it's going to be anybody, let it be the Commanders. And on the other side, if I had to pick one of those teams that I'd like to be in there, I'll take the team that's playing in New York, the Buffalo Bills. That would be my ideal Super Bowl. Bills, Commanders at this point.
I think that's everyone's ideal. Probably. I feel like the world wants the Commanders to win. I feel like the Eagles have their fans, and then kind of their fans kind of box anybody out from being able to show love, because it's kind of when they're good, they're like flipping you off, and when they're not good, they're angry and cornering. But when you're most other teams, it's not that way, because even if you're passionate at the end of the game, you're saying, "Oh man, like that was a really good game," and talking about it like that. But it's just different with those Philly.
It's tough for anybody, right? As a divisional fan, especially when they have Saquon Barkley.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I can't bear it. It hurts. It really does hurt to see what he's been doing. 205 yards in the snow. Come on.
What does the snow got to do? What does the snow got to do with that? There was nobody in his way. Like he just ran straight. Not
But it
taking away
didn't. It
from him,
didn't look
just
like he
saying
was any slower, which is incredible.
it slowed everybody down.
Huh?
So just comparatively, he was still the same, much faster than everybody else.
Right, but it didn't look like
Everybody was
it looked like he was running the same speed. And when we were watching the game, it looks like he's running the same speed. It didn't look like the snow really held him down at all. The truth is,
My favorite thing,
snow will hold you down. If you're running, it's not going to be nearly as easy as it would be if the field didn't have any snow on it. That's why it makes things more difficult when it's snowing out there. Not only for the quarterback to throw, but for the runners and anyone who's blocking. Feet work needs to be on point. Saquon, these guys' legs are made of steel. They really are.
Yeah.
He's, man, and it's tough for me to say it, and it's tough for me to see it, because as a Giants fan, you're just looking back and you're like, how did we just ruin this opportunity to bring back this franchise cornerstone player? But he's the one that's lifting up that team, in my opinion. Without Saquon Barkley, those Eagles, if you replace him with any other above-average running back in the NFL, let's say you put Joe Mixon there. Imagine, make that swap. Mixon to the Eagles, Saquon to the Texans. I think the Texans are probably, maybe they beat the Chiefs last week, but I don't think the Eagles do anything with Joe Mixon. Good team probably. Maybe they win the division, maybe not. They make the playoffs. But Saquon has been the difference maker for the Eagles from start to finish so far this season. And they're
Yeah.
going to be playing a big championship game next week against the Commanders. Go Commanders. Our good friends, the Antonaccis, are big Commanders fans. And I texted him as soon as the Eagles game was ending with the Rams, and I said, I want you to pump this team's cheeks. And of course, he agreed with me too. He would like nothing more than see his team go to the Super Bowl when not many people had the Commanders as a playoff team. You did, though. You did, sir. You called the
Yes,
Commanders
sir.
as a playoff team. But what you also did
100%.
call, though, you did call the Ravens making it to the Super Bowl. And they lost to the Bills in a game that was a coin toss on who was going to take that game. The Bills have the home field, which gives you advantage, of course, when you're in your home arena. Chances on winning that game is higher. It's not a guarantee, especially when you're playing a team like Lamar Jackson's Baltimore Ravens. That was a good game, though. What do we have to say about Mark Andrews? So, I mean, this guy, for the last 6 seasons, has been all reliable, essentially, for the Ravens. And in their biggest game, arguably, he just fumbles. And when I mean by
Yeah.
fumble, it's a literal and a figurative speech, because he fumbled in the middle of the field and then just fumbled the opportunity to tie the game at the end. It's incredible how the way that the sport plays out when you could be one of the best players at your position for the last 5+ years, and when it's the biggest moment, you can't show up. And now people will remember this from your career for a long time. You know what I was saying to a bunch of my Giants fans? I could see Mark Andrews being a Giant next season.
Yeah, I mean, they use Isaiah Likely so much, and I think that Mark Andrews' baseball comp could be Bill Buckner with that, because you bring that to overtime and then you don't know what'll happen. The Ravens had no business even being in that game, but they fought, they came back, they
It was all
I
Lamar.
mean, uh, I mean, I still think that giving the ball to Derrick Henry 16 times is not enough, but regardless, you go with the flow of the game, and you see that the Bills at home just seemed like they were in control in the first half, and then the second half, the Ravens weren't done yet, but then at the end they couldn't. I guess you could say they dropped the ball.
Literally, they did. That's exactly what happened. But Lamar Jackson, he did everything he possibly could. I mean, he had a bad
Yeah.
pick during that game, but I mean, regardless of that, everything else, he was, he was doing everything he could to at least give that team a chance to be able to send it to overtime. That's all you could really ask for
Yeah.
from your
I
quarterback.
mean, you look at Josh Allen threw for 127 yards. If they lose this game, they're gonna say something about that about him. Throwing one interception, throwing 254 yards. I feel like it's almost the same quality game when it came down to it like this. If the interception would have been a pick six that made it a 21-point game, that made it out of reach, or would have been the momentum wise, it didn't seem like it was backbreaking for them. Obviously, you want to score every time you have the ball, but it didn't seem like that was the defining moment of the game.
Let me ask you something. You think if Zay played that game, would that have made a big difference for the outcome of that game, especially for the Ravens?
I don't think so. I think that Lamar. One thing that you really notice when you watch the Ravens is guys who fit in Baltimore with Lamar. That it seems like they click pretty quickly. Say that 5 times fast. I feel like Rashad Bateman really this whole playoffs, and honestly, whenever he gets the opportunity, he makes plays for the Ravens. And of course, Zay Flowers and Lamar have a crazy connection, and they make great plays. But I felt like in this game, just whenever you saw Bateman, you would have either seen Zay Flowers or you would have just or Bateman would have made the play anyway. I feel like this game was really a toss up the way it was, and going out exactly as it did was a sign of how close these teams are, and the Bills' home prowess, like you said, was I think the difference, because the Ravens couldn't get out to that start, and then it was too little, too late.
Last question regarding the Ravens. You think that was Mark Andrews' last game suiting up in purple?
It's hard to think of. I mean, unless he takes a pay cut, I think it's hard to envision them overpaying for him, and he's worth a good amount of money, but overpaying for him in terms of when you have Isaiah Likely and you have a system that works, maybe you could get someone, instead of having him and Likely, you could get a true blocking tight end to be the backup one that maybe can make a couple catches, but isn't really going to be a dynamic offensive force like the both of them, and maybe it'll just make the run game that much better. That was already lethal. So overall, I kind of went around in a circle, but I don't think that he will be back. I think that I would be very surprised if he was back, and I think that if he leaves, he's gonna go ring chasing. I think that he'll be on. He could go to honestly, if the Chiefs win again and Travis Kelce retires, that could be a spot for him.
We'd hate to see that. Finishing up with that, then we'll just quickly go over that game as well. The Chiefs had control over that game against the Texans. CJ Stroud gets bounced out of the playoffs, and
Yeah.
regardless of him winning that playoff game, people have their doubts regarding CJ and those Texans. Truth is that offense was pretty banged up from start of the season all the way to the end. They never had all their pieces ready to go, and it's never easy when you're playing the two-time or three-time Super Bowl champion Patrick Mahomes, two-time back-to-back champion Patrick Mahomes, and
Yeah.
Travis Kelce and company, and that strong defense and Andy Reid in Arrowhead. So there's a lot of factors that go into that game. It ended up being a 9-point game because of that safety that happened at the end. That a lot of people had a lot of money on that spread and are not very happy that
You gotta know the
the
Chiefs. The
Chiefs
Chiefs
took that.
never. The Chiefs never cover those big spreads. But when it comes down to it, I think C.J. Stroud in his sophomore slump didn't have consistent receivers to rely on. I mean, Nico Collins has always been a stud, but he missed some time. So I think that when you look at this team, I think that C.J. Stroud next year will be really what defines him. I think he'll have Stephon Diggs back. He'll have hopefully his guys healthy for a full year, and I think that they could still make some noise. But I think if they would have won this game, and I don't think they would have made it any further, and I think they would have maybe not made any wholesale changes to overhaul certain things, just kind of fine tune the process and have a capable backup if Joe Mixon misses some games. Have a veteran
Damian
backup wide
Pierce had a
receiver
92-yard run.
ready.
I think they really like Damian Pierce.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that I think that if he was the guy, they wouldn't have got Joe Mixon. Like I think they would have got a 1A and a 1B. They wouldn't have got a true horse over him if they believed in him to be that guy. And I think that even if you have three, you have a veteran who's been that guy and then maybe took a step back in his skill, or you just have someone who like Zach Moss that just bounces around from team to team, playing well, playing half the games, getting $1 million checks for doing that. I think that I think the Texans are still in a good place. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. And one thing I wanted to say about this game, real quick, is I am not a Chiefs hater like so many people are, but I think that they need to bring an embellishment penalty to the NFL like there is in hockey because it's not like it. There were a lot of penalties earlier in the game that I actually think were good calls. A lot of people didn't, but I felt like they were good calls by the rules. Take a look at the rules if you got an issue with the rules. But when it comes down to Mahomes trying to get that 15-yard penalty, there should be there should be a price to pay for that because there's no these guys have to there's so much in favor of the offense and it's hard to play both sides, don't get me wrong, but when you're looking at the whole scope of things to slow down and wait for someone to hit you to try and then try and draw a flag, I think that that's embellishment. I think it's unsportsmanlike to do that. You play the game to win, but you play the game to win the right way. A 15-yard penalty in that spot would not have been an easy way for my stomach to see the game go out. I think that the for something like that, I think they had it right by making no call, and I want to know your thoughts on that.
I think it's safe to say that the NFL does better when the Chiefs do better. And that's not saying
Hmm.
anything, but when it comes to the referee performances when the Chiefs are playing,
Hmm.
a lot of people have question marks. In regards to adding a penalty that's specifically seen that is done by the Chiefs, whether or not we believe it's something that should be implemented, will it be implemented because does it make sense for the league? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to make sense for the league to put this into play because they do better when the Chiefs do better, which is a sad thing because the league and the fan bases, they love having a superstar. They love having someone on the podium. Currently, that's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and that team in KC. If they're going to start penalizing them or at least obviously it's not specifically them, but penalizing the NFL in general for things that specifically are being done by a KC team. Whether or not it should be done, we can agree it should be done. They should be penalized. You shouldn't be doing that. But are they going to put it into action? I don't think so. The NFL is not perfect. And I think that this is something for them that it's going to fall. If you brought it to Roger Goodell's attention, it's going to fall into the back of the binder. And he's going to say, well, I got 1,500 other things that I got to figure out before I figure this part out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that very big focus on the Chiefs when I asked you that, of course, because of the example being the Chiefs, but it wasn't something that I wanted to be because of the Chiefs. It's just it's quarterbacks have so much leverage that if they pull up and they get hit, they can get their team yards just for not doing a football play and going out of bounds. So I think that fits under the line of unsportsmanlike, and I'd love to hear what our listeners think. If you think that it can fall under the mark of unsportsmanlike to be embellishing, to be trying to draw a penalty, kind of like when they're at the line screaming the play calls in college. They'll call like I don't remember exactly what they call it, but it's when you try to mimic their calls and they false start. It's actually unsportsmanlike on the defense. I don't know if you knew that, but I think that it's something definitely to look at. But I want to know if you guys think that that's something that should be done. Whether it will be, none of us have any control over. But I want to know what your thoughts are.
College football rules are always a little whacked out, in my opinion. Not saying it's not right, but I just think it's a little whacked out a little bit.
Sure.
Just a slight amount. But Sunday we're gonna have two huge games: 3 o'clock Commanders versus Eagles. 6:30 will be the Bills versus the Chiefs. And man, can I not wait for Sunday football because these are gonna be good games. Divisional side on one side, the other side is the battle of the two big teams, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Can't ask for better Sunday football. So we're excited, and obviously next week we'll give you guys the recaps of those games and who will be taking their talents to the Super Bowl. Will it be one of those? Will it be the Eagles? Will it be the Commanders? Will it be the Bills? Will it be the Chiefs? Hopefully it's the Bills. Hopefully it's the Commanders because we don't want to see Philly or Patty Mahomes winning another one. But you guys let us know who you guys want to see winning the Super Bowl. All us fans, comment away and let us know. We're going to shift a little bit. We're going to finish up with our football today and get into some of the Yankees and how we like to call them the boys. We call them the boys.
Boys.
Not to differentiate themselves with the Cowboys because they are also the boys, and we should make sure they're the boys.
If you look at Harry and I's conversation, you just see a text where we're just talking about the boys. You know we're talking about the Yankees. Like we don't even have to say the Yanks. I mean, sometimes we will, but you don't.
Sometimes you have to say it doesn't matter. Anyways, we gotta clarify some things here. Josh and I haven't really talked much about how this offseason has gone so far. Really, we've talked about some of the free agents and things like that, but we really haven't had a conversation about where does this team stand right now versus some of these other teams like the Dodgers and what the Dodgers have been doing. We're going to get into that too a little bit, and some of these other teams that are doing. Frankly, I'm not very happy right now as a fan. I will say this. I'm just really not happy with what I've seen so far. And, the moves that have happened so far, great, but is this team really a better team in 2025 so far than it was in 2024? I don't think so. What do you think?
I think so. I think so. I think because we're getting rid of a certain type of energy, a certain type of vibe, a certain type of player, and a certain type of expectation. Because I felt like as much as there was trouble with certain things with the way Gleyber played, it was always up and down. It was a love hate relationship. Wish him well in the future, but I kind of feel like you're only as strong as your weakest link, and he wasn't the weakest link as a player, but I think in terms of effort, in terms of just fundamentals, in terms of IQ, I think that all of those little things were where he really like I could see it being totally draining when one of those errors happens or one of those base running blunders happens and just it takes the whole team out of their rhythm, whether it's a winning streak, whether it's a game. I don't want to blame everything on him, but I think that Soto leaving, of course, that's tough. But you bring in some veterans, you upgrade to the best rotation in baseball. I mean, it's gonna be a different type of way to win games for more often than not, but the boys still pack a punch. Don't sleep on them. But I think that the Yankees are better as a baseball team. Do I think that means that they'll win many more regular season games? No. But I think that it'll just be a smoother process. To beat us, you're gonna have to give us your best. You're not gonna get us beating ourselves. And I say us because I'm talking about the Yankees, because obviously we're fans. But when you look at it overall, maybe there are some other guys you can bring in, more veterans, more guys that put elbow grease in, more guys that grind and work hard every day. And I think that really addition by subtraction in that regard. But of course, making up for Soto in the lineup is going to be tough. But I think having the guys that we brought in, it's very debatable that this team could win just as many games. Now, the offensive execution in the playoffs is where we might need to get another guy or two on offense. But I'm not necessarily thinking that this team can't do it.
I think in terms of whether they can or can't do it is not the question. In terms of the competition in the American League, I'm not too worried about it. The National League is definitely stacked, but that's something you worry about in the World Series. To worry about the regular season first, and then once you get to the playoffs, you got to worry about the American League, and then you worry about the World Series. I think on paper, it's pretty safe to say that this Yankees roster is the best in the American League.
Yeah.
But comparative to what they did last season, which was make it to the World Series, lose, and how do we add to that? Because we were right there, right? And when I say we, I'm talking about the Yankees, obviously, as being part of the team. We were right there. Now, losing Soto, I want to make this very clear. This was a big loss. Let's not beat around the bush here and say, yeah, it was a loss. It is what it is. That's a big loss. He was the top 3 most productive offensive player in baseball last season, and he is no longer on this lineup. We also lose Gleyber Torres, who, in terms of production from this team and the roster last season, he was a top 5 producing offensive player last season. Verdugo's gone. Rizzo's gone. Guys who weren't playing so well, but at least in terms of Verdugo, defensively sound. Rizzo, would you rely on him nowadays? Maybe not because of last season's blunders. But this is what you've added to your offense so far. Cody Bellinger, Paul Goldschmidt, fill in the blank. The offense is not better, in my opinion. You lose Soto. You needed to replace first base regardless. You knew that was happening. Rizzo was a free agent. You needed to get a first baseman. You got a bargain deal in Paul Goldschmidt. But is he what he was in 2022? Probably not. He's 37 years old. But if he can do anything remotely in between 2023 and 2024, and he could do that, I'll take that. Sound defensive player, of course. For a 1-year deal, no questions asked.
Just want to interject and just say, I think that if we can get the numbers similar to what Gleyber was doing or better, I think that that's a win because of how much better he is with the glove.
Well, even with that right there, then how can we say that this team is better, especially considering the offense, which was the biggest problem, was the offense, the consistency in the offense. And we've lose Soto, and let's say Gleyber and Paul Goldschmidt even each other out based on overall play, offense, defense, everything, because Goldschmidt's a great glove. Gleyber, right? This team is definitely better defensively. Cody Bellinger, much better defensive player than Juan Soto is. Soto got a great arm, but you never know if he's going to be able to get to the ball. That's his biggest flaw overall.
He'll be at the age of 5 years.
I've said the same thing. Cody Bellinger is an interesting acquisition because he's a former Rookie of the Year, former MVP, and then COVID happened, slumped, refound himself in 2023, took another step back in 2024. He's got a 2-year deal where you take a chance on someone like that because he's a lefty and he plays great defense. And if you can get what he did in 2023, even a version of him in 2024, you're getting a productive player. You're getting a very good player, borderline all-star player, right? We still don't have a third baseman. Yeah. And what I'm seeing is this team is taking a seat back and trying to figure out the landscape of the MLB. What is happening right now? Because the Dodgers are like golfing everybody up. Whatever they can take, it's like they want to remove competition out of the field. They're like, if you're a free agent, let's have an interview. Come on in. Would you like to be a Dodger? That's basically what they're doing. And then the deferral thing, and we're definitely going to get into that because I know that it's something that you would like to talk about, and of course I'd like to also get into. But in regards to what we're working with right now offensively, I say we're worse off than we were last season. Defensively, overall, check mark. Sure, we're a better defensive team, but we still don't have a third baseman. Currently, it's DJ, Oswaldo Cabrera, and Peraza as the depth chart at third base. Bullpen, you can argue it's better, but you could also argue it's not really that much better. Regardless of how you feel about Clay Holmes, and I know we've talked about him pretty badly in the past, but regardless of the fact is he's an overall productive relief pitcher. Yeah. And now the Mets are paying him to be a starter. However you want to take that, that says something. They gave him $39 million. Tommy Kahnle, as of right now, from my understanding, he's still a free agent, but was one of the better relief pitchers on this team last season. Gone. Let's just assume, because it doesn't seem like they have any inclination to bring him back. Yeah. So you acquire Devin Williams. You trade a very solid asset for Devin Williams. We'll get into that afterwards when we get to the starting rotation. He's an incredible acquisition. Needed to be done. Required. If Soto comes back, it was a requirement to add to the bullpen anyways, right? It was a requirement to add at first base because you're losing Rizzo, right? These things are requirements. So they get him. They add Fernando Cruz in a deal that sends Jose Trevino to Cincinnati. They get Alex Jackson as a backup catcher, who knows if he's actually going to be on this roster to be the backup catcher.
That was probably the one move that I probably wouldn't have even touched on, because I don't even know if he's going to play in the majors. But
regardless, the point was to get Fernando Cruz because he's a strikeout guy and he's a project. And I trust this team a lot when it comes to figuring out their pitching. And they have a bunch of other guys on low-level salaries that have been doing really well. Ian Hamilton, Jake Cousins. They bring Loaizaga back on a one-year deal who didn't pitch all of last season. So you don't really know what you're going to get out of him. But let's just hope we get something similar out of what Loaizaga's gotten. I don't see this bullpen being significantly better than it was last season. I agree that it's better. Some might agree that it's the same or worse. I say it's better, but not significantly. I don't sit there and say this puts us over the top. And then I go to the starting rotation where they add Max Fried. Wow, oh, wow. What a nice little look at this beautiful picture we have of him and saying, when the Yankees say they're interested in you, Perk, I'm going to listen. We love seeing that. We love hearing that. He obviously wanted to be a Yankee, and he's obviously a phenomenal starting pitcher. And I'm so excited to have him to be the number 2 in this rotation because he makes things a little bit easier. But it was a luxury that this team and roster didn't necessarily need. The rotation was pretty great before getting Max Fried. And they go out and they get him. They say we can now afford to go and add to this because we're not getting Soto anymore. And then you look down the rest of the rotation. You have Luis Hill. You have Clark Schmidt. You have obviously you have Garrett Cole at the start of the rotation, and you have Nestor Cortez. You trade Marcus Stroman. Rodon Stroman. So you have 6 starters currently right now. You would have had 7. You traded Nestor. Solid player, have to make that deal happen. You send him off, but you didn't give up nothing for Devin Williams. It just shows. And you have now Marcus Stroman, which they have completely botched, in my opinion, on how they're going to trade this guy. They've made it seem very desperate, and at this point, I don't think they trade him unless they're going to be eating probably about $7 million of that salary because he's got 2 years remaining on that deal. And that's considering if they want, and what they're asking for Stroman is a MLB ready player, someone who's going to be playing in the MLB right now. And I think that's a very hard ask for them right now. Teams are very not inclined to give a pitcher who's got 2 years remaining at $19 million a year, whose ERA's in the 4s and doesn't get you a strikeout per 9. So they put themselves in the back wall when it comes to moving Stroman. And then when I look at the whole grand scheme of things, I'm not in love with. I'm waiting. I'm like, listen, I'll take what we've done so far. I think it's great what we've done so far. But why have we stopped? And I'm not saying, and we're going to now get into the Dodgers a little bit too after you comment about what I'm saying about the Yankees. Well, I'm not saying necessarily be the Dodgers, but you see the team that just won the World Series. They could have sat back and made their minimum acquisitions and say, let's run it back. But they are going out and taking literally everyone they can. Whether or not we think that's good or not, I'm not saying that the Yankees need to be that, but I'm saying you have to have a little bit sense of urgency when it comes to making an acquisition here. We still need a third baseman. So that should be the grand scheme. If it comes to making a trade happen, we have to look at who's available and determine. And I'm certain they're doing these things, but they got to make a decision here and go after somebody, because we are 2 months, not even 2 months away from pitchers and catchers reporting. We need to set this roster, and we don't have a third baseman. Is DJ LeMahieu going to be third base?
No.
What do you think?
I don't think so. I think there'll be a move for like a Ha-Sung Kim or a Jurickson Profar. I do think that's coming. I think that the baseball world's kind of paused for Sasaki, even though he ended up on the Dodgers. I think that the whole baseball world stopped to see where he went because I feel like the Yankees really thought they had a chance, and with that, they probably would have looked at what they would have had to do because a player like that comes around, you don't say no. But whether it would have been trading Clark Schmidt, whether it have been Luis Heel, we would never know what the plan was after they got him. But that's a guy that you get if he picks your team at that price. But I think that you make valid points about the offense, but I think that overall the offense in the regular season, sure, there's games that every offense goes low, but and I feel like a lot of times with Clay Holmes when he wasn't closing, he was great, but when he was closing, he was blowing the game that the seventh inning guy and the eighth inning guy both had amazing games, and he blew it every time. If he was, he's a great relief pitcher. Don't know what he's going to be as a starter. Don't have any issue with him personally, but in terms of being a major league closer, that's just not it. And the Mets will never have to worry about that as long as Edwin Diaz is healthy. But I think that you look at you could bring in a guy like Carlos Estevez or Kyle Finnegan for the bullpen. But I agree with you that we're not done. And that's a part that I didn't forget to mention, but I should have mentioned that I don't believe that they're done. I think that the baseball world was just at a standstill for Sasaki. I feel like there's also a couple of names that are floating around in within the pipelines that no one knows about on the outside. Guys maybe that our teams are maybe willing to move, maybe not, but people are waiting to see where they go. Maybe teams are waiting to see if Vladdy extends because maybe if a team trades for Vladdy, then they might have an asset to move. I think that there's just a lot of moving parts, but in terms of the Yankees, the bullpen, the bullpen is not worse. The bullpen has potential to be better, but it's not worse. And I really think that having the anchor at the end makes them better, makes everyone pitch better. Luke Weaver was great, but to have him come in for 1 to 2 innings in that old Andrew Miller role is going to be so amazing.
I
I
agree with
think
that.
that I think that there's so much value in what he can bring. The fact that he can do it and he could do it 2 innings, then come back again the next day, which does I wouldn't always recommend, but it's just there's so much value in him. I
Now
think
you
that
know
that
what
was
you have out of
fine.
Luke Weaver. It makes things a lot better. We didn't know last season. Now we know, and now he's in the back end of that bullpen. It's definitely a great combination. And Luke, if you're somehow watching this, I do want to apologize because I didn't mention you in my first batch relievers when I was talking about the Yankee bullpen. But you are quite an incredible reliever, and I just want to make sure that you get your kudos because you are a big part of the reason why the Yankees, in my opinion, even was able to make it as far as they did. Just having that consistent lockdown reliever who I don't even want to call him a closer, even though he was towards the end of the season last season. He was just like a 2 inning guy, like any role. It could have been down two, tied, up two. Like you're bringing him into the game in big situations. So yes, he was a closer for the second half of the season, but he was more like the savior for the team, in my
See,
opinion.
I would call him the team's the relief pitcher. Like he was everybody's relief.
The really
If
like
a
underline the and italics
yeah,
and like bold and everything.
exactly. Like he was our reliever. Like he relieved the starters when they didn't
Hey, he's on a
have their
bargain price
stuff.
too. He's getting paid 2.5 million next season.
Yeah,
How
and
do you not?
I
How do you
think
not bring him back? It's like I'll give you 10 years,
exactly,
2.5 million a year for the next 10 years. The Yankees are probably telling him right now. You want to sign a 10 year,
exactly,
$22.5 million deal? No problem. Um,
exactly. But I think that you look at that bullpen, and I think that I think that just everyone that was there just knew that there was something that needed to be done. I think that there's still a couple more guys to get. Also, one more they could take one guy back from the Mets. That guy Brooks Raley. I think he'd be a good fit. Another lefty out of the pen. I think that and I like to see Tim Hill back. I was a little critical when he first came around, just because of his numbers when he was on the White Sox, just like what Jake Cousins did when they came over. But it worked out, and I'd like to see him back, and I'd like to see him pitching in those big spots.
Typically, what the Yankees have been doing is just getting these relievers. Even going back to Clay Holmes, when they got him from Pittsburgh, he was a nobody. And then
Yeah.
from the immediate start, he was just like this incredible sinker throwing pitcher, and it was great. And listen, good for
Yeah.
him. He got his bag, and the Mets literally said, we do not want you to be the closer. We want you to be the exact opposite of closer. We want you to be the starter. We don't want you anywhere near the 9th inning. Let's get you closer to the front of the game. We'll have a better chance with you. And he's like, you know what?
Yeah.
Screw it. If you're going to pay me $39 million, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll be the bullpen catcher or bullpen pitcher if you want me to do it. I'll do that. Listen, you never know with these guys at this point. When they get thrown in the bag, they probably say a lot of crazy things. But I do want to quickly talk a little bit about the Dodgers and what they've really been doing with this deferment, all this money that they've been sending off for the next 10 to 20 years. And, they've essentially done it with every single person they've signed over the last, 3 to 4 years, especially the major contracts. Mm-hmm. I know you definitely don't love what's happening over here. I mean, who can really love it? But they're not doing anything wrong technically. So what do we do? What do we do in this situation with what the Dodgers are doing?
So it's such a interesting. I think that the NHL's rules are what need to be in place in every sport, where you can sign a 10-year, $100 million deal and get $95 million in cash the first year, but you're a cap hit of $10 million every year for 10 years. It makes no one's obviously going to get that much up front, but let's say you do that and then they're making the minimum for the other 9 years. It makes you get your bag, and then if after that you're also super tradable if it doesn't work out, or you backload it and you say, look, we're gonna give it a go, and then you're this cap hit, and then as we expect you to grow, just like those Acuna deals, the Steele deals like that, then the cap goes the same through every year, and then you get more cash as time goes on. Or if you're hitting us for $10 million a year, but we're giving you 5, 5, 5, then it starts to raise. It might be time to trade you, where it's just an internal decision. Where when you look at the making it go beyond the years played and playing with debt, I just think that that's something that's not professional. It's not illegal, and you can't knock them for it. But in terms of just how to move forward, because you're gonna have teams moving with debt, and then there's gonna be then you're gonna be paying guys. You're gonna be paying $100 million to guys not playing, plus $300 million payroll, and teams might not make.
But frankly, does this matter?
Money.
Because the Dodgers seem like they're the only teams doing this. Not like the other 29. Like Yankees could be doing this. Are they doing this? They're saying this doesn't seem like a great financial plan for us. So I don't think a lot of teams are really considering this. Maybe you have that occasional player, like for instance Nolan Arenado, where he's got some deferments. Unique scenarios throughout the league, and his is not like it's like a huge deferral. He's getting a couple $1 million deferred a year for the next 15 years. Fine. Some people say that's an investment plan for the players too. They don't have to spend all their money right off the bat. Whatever. Right. What the Dodgers are doing is they're giving it to everybody. And what's happened now is that they have a $375 million luxury tax payroll for 2025, which is insanity, right?
Insane.
It's insanity to consider that. But when you have the resources to be able to pay that, at least right now, it's relatively easy. What's happening though is that here's the real issue, because what they're doing is not the problem, at least in terms of the scope of what the MLB tells you can or can't do. The problem is they're actually getting taxed less because of all the deferrals. So they're paying a less tax instead of paying it throughout the rest of the contract of that player. And so they are somewhat getting an advantage early on where they're paying less.
And that's on the tax. Pretty sure tax money goes to the other teams too.
Tax money it's spread out through all the teams, correct. Now, that's something that needs to be looked into more, because regardless of the fact is, seems like it would be a penalty that would, or not a penalty, but a rule that would come into play that would only affect the Dodgers. Not saying it would actually only affect the Dodgers. It'd be implemented throughout the whole entire 30 teams. But nobody else is doing this. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the Cubs, the Mets, could they be doing this? Sure. You think if Steve Cohen said, you know what, great idea, and I could afford it now if I wanted to, but if I did that, I could have a $500 million payroll right now and say, screw it, right? Yeah. He could do that. But it's not financially sound to do that, because what's going to happen, as much as, yes, it is an advantage now that they're paying less on the taxes, the Dodgers themselves are setting themselves back. Very much so from year 10 of these deals, let's just say, to year 20. Like, there's going to be a time where their payroll is going to be absurdly high Yet the active roster is not getting paid nearly as much as what the payroll states because they're paying Ohtani so much money. They're paying Teoscar and Freddie and Blake Snell and every single person that they've signed. Even probably Roki got a deferral too. He's only getting $6.5 million a year. They're probably like,
no,
we'll give you.
That's all he's allowed to get because he's under 25.
Right, but what I'm saying is he got $6.5 million signed. Probably got $1 million, and then they're probably like, we'll defer the rest of that contract every single couple of weeks. We're gonna like, let's say they're supposed to get paid on a weekly basis. They're like, all right, we'll pay you on a 2-week basis, whatever it is. They probably made up some ridiculous thing for his salary too. I'm just making a joke because his salary is obviously very small for what type of player he is, but that's because he's 23 years old and he's got to wait till 25 to get the big bucks. But you were saying something else that I wanted to also quickly talk about was that, we were all kind of waiting for this Roki thing to play out. The Dodgers, the team that won the Roki saga, they weren't only waiting around, though. They went out and got Kirby Yates and Tanner Scott within 3 days after that. So whatever we want to say, Tanner Scott is a phenomenal relief pitcher. I would have loved the Yankees to have if it was the same contract, I couldn't have been upset. If the Yankees gave him 4 years, $72 million, I would have been pretty happy that Tanner Scott's in the Yankees.
Hold on. Sorry.
I'm holding.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Roki's contract it's starting with that renewable and then the pre-arb and then the arb for 6 years before his free agency. So he's getting 6.5 now, but he's be making $500K like salary for the next 3 years. So some of these guys like he'll probably just replace Glasnow's salary on their thing. So
it'll be quite interesting how these salaries end up working out. I mean, the MLB landscape is truly interesting to maneuver through because teams don't have salaries. They have these luxury taxes. They say you can spend however you want. And then we kind of have to just sit there and watch comparative to the MLB, the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, where there's a cap. And of course, the NHL, they seem that they have a lockdown in terms of what their rules are and how things should be. And maybe the other sports should look at them as a pedestal to say maybe we should look at how well they're operating and go based on that. Because I like that rule where regardless of the fact that your salary is, you're getting hit. If it's a $70 million deal over 7 years, you're getting hit $10 million a year.
Yeah,
I gotta say, this is always a pleasure. I love doing this with you on a weekly basis, talking about all these sports, Yankees, football. Can't get any better than this. Thank you to all the fans too. You guys are phenomenal. We don't do this without you guys commenting away and giving us some life over here. So we really do appreciate you guys. Instagram, right? That's where you can find us. Comment away. Any questions, call us crazy. You know how much I love hearing that I'm crazy. Tell me I'm crazy. Say, Harry, you're crazy. That Yankee bullpen is 10 times better than it was last season. Or, Harry, you're crazy. The defense is not better than it was last season. The defense is worse than it was last season. I'll call you crazy if you say that. But I want you to call me crazy. I want you to call us crazy. Tell us in the comments. And Josh is going to tell you guys where you could find us.
Yeah, for those of you that find us on one of these platforms, the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, those are the other ones. Big shout out to everyone that watches. We'll get to some more questions next week. I'm going to pop on social and answer a couple of the ones throughout the week. Give us some content to have online. But big shout out to Matt, J. Cluck, Lindsay, everyone who's commenting. Don't stop. We see you. We're just fine tuning our process over here.
Don't stop believing. Na, na, na. All right, now for the best part of the show, our famous Yogiisms. I never said most of the things that I said. So that means there's all these Yogiisms that I've said so far. Did he not actually say them? Who knows? Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Score podcast. We look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Stay tuned.